Ashurnasirpal really sort of drawing on previous conceptions of kingship that we've seen before, but also some new ones as well, right? Again, he's an old king in the Neo-Assyrian type, but also he's establishing himself as a very new kind of king, a real true emperor, so to speak. So I thought we'd take a look at some of these attributes. So throw these out to me. What are some of the attributes of kingship we've seen so far? If you're Ashurnasirpal II, you're founding a new city. What are you going to depict yourself as? What are the attributes of kingship that you're going to put in this stele to really establish yourself? Yeah.
King is builder.
King is builder. Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. So certainly, right. The construction of this palace itself is absolutely fantastic. And in this stele, we see a tremendous amount of information about his building projects. Canals. I'll read you this one right here. The establishment of the city itself, which is fascinating because, we have the architecture and then also we have this text which describes what it would have been like. So Ashurnasirpal says, I took over again the city of Kalhu in the wisdom that's mine with the knowledge that the king of the subterranean waters bestowed upon me. I removed the old hill of rubble and I dug it down to its water level. So essentially he's taking this old city, cleared it out, and he's starting anew from scratch. I heaped up a new terrace from the water level in the upper edge and laid 120 layers of bricks. And upon that I erected my royal palace for my personal enjoyment. It consisted of 7 beautiful halls, all roofed with boxwood, cedar, cypress, juniper, magan ash, anointed with bands of bronze. I hung them in the doorways. I surrounded the doorways with decorative bronze bolts to proclaim my heroic deeds. I painted on the palace walls with a vivid blue paint how I marched across the mountain ranges, the foreign countries and the seas, my conquests across the world. I had lapis lazuli colored glazed bricks made and set in the walls above the gates. I brought in people from all countries over whom I rule, those who were conquered personally, and they decorated my palace. So we can see, again, a tremendous amount of attention, not just in creating an opulent palace, right, but bringing people from all corners of the periphery, artisans, craftsmen, to build something that was representative of the whole. So definitely king is builder. What else? What else are we going to see in this stele? What other attributes of kingship have we come to expect? What else does the king do for us? King is builder.
Leader in conquest.
All right, so leader in conquest, right? So certainly that's a king that subdues the enemies, and we see this in the prologue, actually, to this stele. The palace of Ashur. This is the palace of Ashurnasirpal, high priest of Ashur, the legitimate king of the world, king of Assyria, the heroic warrior who always acts upon trust, inspiring signs given by the Lord Ashur, and therefore has no rival among the rulers of the 4 quarters of the world. The shepherd of all mortals, not afraid of battle, the onrushing flood which brooks no resistance, the king who subdues the unsubmissive lands and rules over all mankind, the king who always acts upon trust-inspiring signs of the Lord's, the great gods, and has conquered all countries and dominions. So certainly, right, yeah, king as warrior, king as conquest, king as lawgiver too. Ashurnasirpal is drawing on all these conceptions of kingship and bringing them together. We have also, right, the king honors the gods, and we have a long text about how Ashurnasirpal again raises Ninurta up, this new god of war, and erects in Kalhu temples to Enlil, Ninurta, rebuilding them, reestablishing them, and again decorating them opulently in the same style as his own palace. So typical, right? Very, very typical. But what we see also in this stele are a few new traits and a few new interesting elements. For one thing, Ashurnasirpal goes into great depth about how he ends up bringing trees from his conquests back to Assyria. There's a list of almost 40 different types of trees. Cedar, cypress, perfume trees, maganash, olive trees, tamarind, oaks, the list goes on and on and on. And he says that they vied for each other in fragrance and that he created a garden that was just absolutely fantastic. What's more, these trees grew better in Assyria, supposedly, than they did at home. So again, Assyria as the center, Assyria as the heart of this new empire that's being founded. We also see that Ashurnasirpal not just only brings the plants from the empire, he brings the people there too, and actually brings them there for a party that inaugurates the palace. He writes, "When I inaugurated this palace at Kalhu, I treated for 10 days with food and drink 47,074 people, men and women, who I called from all across my entire country. 5,000 important people, delegates from Hatti, Tyre, Sidon," and he lists all the cities. All in all, 69,574 invited guests. And furthermore, I provided them with the means to clean and anoint themselves. I did them honors, and I sent them back happy and healthy to their own countries. So, so this emphasis on bringing the plants to the center, bringing all of the people to the center, this establishment of Assyria as, or rather Nimrud as the center of Assyria, and this palace as the center of Nimrud. A very different and new kind of Assyrian ideology, very hierarchical, that we see during the reign of Ashurnasirpal. Should also say he goes into depth about the long list of things people ate at this banquet that he gives for the entire empire. Thousands of ducks, geese, fish, jars of beer, 10,000 jars of beer, 10,000 skins of wine. It sounds like a lot, but actually if you do the math, that actually only comes down to about 1/7 of a jar of beer for each person that attended. So apparently maybe it wasn't as much as we might think. But really we're seeing the process of the world being restructured, the world being reinterpreted through Assyrian eyes, and also through Assyrian monuments. So we look at this depiction of Ashurnasirpal, and again, there are many elements we've seen before. We see him surrounded by, again, these iconic images of the gods like Sin, Shamash, Ninurta. Also, if you look a little closely, we see that he's actually wearing a necklace with all of the same gods represented. So, you know, again, this is just very, very clear, the connection between the king and the gods themselves. We can compare this image of Ashurnasirpal II to what we saw during the Middle Assyrian period, during the reign of Tukulti-Ninurta II. The hairstyle is the same. The flouted skirt with the fringes, again, right, the same. And the scepter, actually, that's being held by Tukulti-Ninurta also we see during the reign of Ashurnasirpal. The headdress becomes very typical in the Neo-Assyrian period. This sort of cap with a small conical point becomes almost a sign of the Neo-Assyrian king. But you can see that Ashurnasirpal is drawing on imagery that was common to Assyria even as early as 1200. Not too much, again, of the palace survives, but we do have several suites of rooms that are in place. And again, while the Assyrians are drawing on, you know, the use of orthostats that they take from Syria, that they take from the Hittites, we see a number of developments that are pretty fantastic and quite new. One of them is the use of these monumental lamassu. And this is an example of one here from the British Museum. We actually have 7 sets of these large bull-like divinities. You can see, again, these are composite creatures with the body of a bull, wings of an eagle, and the head of a man. And these were actually set up in the entrances to the main throne room. These would have been staring down at you. Again, they're quite large, and and one would have had to pass by them, entering into this sort of inner sanctum, the throne room of the palace. So they're symbolically protective, but also incredibly imposing. But again, this is a period of experimentation, right? These are very new. The Assyrians are sort of, really figuring out who they are during the reign of Ashurnasirpal II. So you can see this in the art itself. Is there anything weird about this Lamassu? You guys can see off the bat? Anything a little strange? Yeah. Yeah, it's got 5 legs, right? So you have Assyrian artists who are trying to really figure out what does it mean to do sculpture that is supposed to be viewed from both the front and from the side. To remove this leg would, just looking at it from the side in 2 dimensions would kind of make the Lamassu a little unstable. So they actually depicted it in both ways, giving it, 5 legs. This changes later on with Lamassu from later Assyrian kings, as we'll see. But again, it's linked to this process of development and experimentation. The throne room itself is about 47 meters long by 12 meters wide. Again, limited by the length of timber at the time, right? You can't go beyond 12 meters just because you can't roof the structure. We don't have trees that are that long, but 12 meters is still quite a width to span. In addition to these Lamassu guarding the entrances, the orthostats that line the outside of the throne room that face into this outer courtyard are lined with sculptural reliefs. And particularly sculptural reliefs of people bringing tribute to the Assyrian king. And the placement of these scenes is very, very specific, right? We've seen this at palaces like Mari, where the decoration facing the outer courtyard holds a propagandistic message, right? This is something that people are going to see right before they come into audience with the king. People who are coming to do business from, as far away as Assyria or Babylon. This is what they're going to see as they enter the courtyard. Mari had 300 years to develop its program of reliefs. This is a brand new sort of purpose-built palace by Ashurnasirpal. So it's quite telling that he chooses to really show what's taking place in the courtyard. Mainly tributaries, leading again to a scene of the king himself. Accumulates with this depiction of Ashurnasirpal, shown in great detail, wearing jewelry with the beard and the hat that we saw in the banquet stele, drinking wine, and drinking wine also with his bow at rest, kind of giving us a sense that under his control, the entire Assyrian world is at peace. We see the emphasis on musculature and realism in these Assyrian reliefs. He's actually being attended by, again, a beardless individual, probably a eunuch who would have attended him, who's actually serving him wine here and kind of whisking away the flies. This is a fly whisk. These positions, again, while we look at them and we think, oh, they're kind of, perfunctory servants, they're doing things like holding parasols, they're serving wine. These are actually very high-level officials in the Assyrian capital. If you remember, Sargon himself was a cupbearer of Kish. These are people who had the ear of the king, and as a result would have been able to have quite a bit of say. So we shouldn't dismiss them outright.